This happened when I was 19, during the summer after my first year of college. My uncle had a cabin deep in the woods, one of those old, barely held together places he used for hunting trips. He wasn't using it that summer, so he offered to let me stay there for a couple of weeks. He thought I could use the solitude, a break from the stress of school and city life. I wish I had never gone. The cabin was small, just one main room and a bathroom. No electricity, no running water, just a generator that barely worked. It was surrounded by thick trees, the kind that made it feel like the world just stopped outside the porch. There was no cell service. The first few nights were peaceful. I read books, fished in the nearby lake, and enjoyed the quiet. Then, on the fourth night, I woke up to a sound outside. It was subtle, like footsteps, but slow, careful. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The only light came from the moon spilling in through the window. I held my breath, straining to hear. Then, silence. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe I imagined it. I told myself that and forced myself to go back to sleep. The next day, I hiked a little deeper into the woods, exploring. I found an old, dried-up creek bed, some rusted animal traps, and bones, scattered and picked clean. Probably just from deer or something, but they looked strange, like they had been arranged on purpose. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I noticed something in the trees. A shape, dark, barely visible through the branches. It wasn't moving. I squinted, but before I could focus, a branch cracked somewhere else, closer. I snapped my head in that direction, but there was nothing there. When I looked back, the shape was gone. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. That night, I woke up again. This time, it wasn't footsteps. It was breathing. Right outside the cabin, slow, ragged, just beyond the window. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Then a whisper, not words, just the softest, almost inhuman exhale. Right against the wood. I wanted to look. I needed to look, but something inside me said, "Don't." I stayed frozen, my body rigid under the blanket, staring at the ceiling. I don't know how long it lasted, but eventually, the breathing faded. The night went silent again. In the morning, I found something on the porch, a single, smeared handprint, but it wasn't right. It was too large, the fingers too long, like they had been stretched. I told myself I was done. I packed my things. But the road back to town was a 4-hour hike, and I knew I wouldn't make it before dark. I convinced myself I could last one more night. That night, I barricaded the door, pushed the old dresser in front of it. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I kept the lantern burning, sat on the bed with my knife, and forced myself to stay awake. Somewhere past midnight, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to the feeling of something pressing against the cabin wall. Slow, steady, like it was leaning its weight against it. Then, a click. The doorknob, turning. I stopped breathing. The dresser in front of the door creaked as something pushed against it. Not forceful, just testing. Then silence, then a long, dragging sound, like nails or claws. It moved across the wall, slow, deliberate. Then the whispering started again, soft, right outside. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't a voice, it was wrong. Then it stopped, and the night was dead silent again. I didn't sleep. I waited until the first light of dawn, then I grabbed my bag and left. I didn't look back. I walked fast. Then I ran. I made it back to town by noon, exhausted and shaking. When I told my uncle, he just stared at me. Then he said, "You should have left the first night." I never asked him what he meant, and I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my apartment, I swear I hear that whisper, right outside my window. This happened when I was 15. I haven't talked about it much, mostly because people either don't believe me or tell me I was just imagining things. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. And I still don't have an explanation. The summer after my freshman year of high school, I got my first job working at a local daycare. It wasn't an official thing, just a family-owned place run out of an old house on the edge of town. They paid under the table, but I didn't care. It was easy money, and I liked kids. The building itself was old, I mean really old. The kind of place with crooked floors and doors that didn't quite shut right. There were 3 floors. The main level where the kids played, the basement where we stored supplies, and the upstairs, which was off limits. I don't know why we weren't allowed up there. The owner, Miss Carla, just said it was unsafe. She never explained why. The kids, of course, were obsessed with it. They'd dare each other to sneak up the stairs when no one was looking, but none of them ever actually did it. And I always had the strangest feeling when I walked past the staircase. Like I was being watched. It started about 2 weeks in. I was helping one of the little girls, Ellie, wash her hands when she suddenly looked over my shoulder and smiled. "Who's that?" she asked. I turned, expecting to see one of the other kids. There was no one there. I laughed it off and said, "Who are you talking about?" She frowned and pointed toward the hallway that led to the stairs. "The girl in the white dress." I felt my stomach drop. "There's no girl in a white dress, sweetie." Ellie just kept staring, then whispered, "She's not supposed to be here." I didn't know what to say to that. That night, I told myself it was just a kid's imagination. They make things up all the time, right? But then it happened again, and again. Different kids. Always pointing toward the hallway, always mentioning the girl in the white dress, always saying the same thing. "She's not supposed to be here." One afternoon, I was cleaning up after lunch when I heard footsteps overhead. Slow, uneven, like someone walking barefoot across the wooden floor upstairs. I froze. Miss Carla wasn't there that day. It was just me and the kids. I knew no one was supposed to be up there. I walked to the bottom of the staircase and listened. Silence. Then a soft creak, like someone shifting their weight. I should have called someone. I should have grabbed the kids and left. Instead, I took one step up, then another. The air felt heavy, thick. I gripped the railing, my heart pounding, and leaned forward just enough to see the top of the staircase. Something moved, just for a second, a pale shape disappearing around the corner. I ran. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I brought my phone to work and decided to do something stupid. I set up the camera, propped it against the wall near the staircase, and hit record. I let it run for an hour while I went about my day. At lunchtime, I grabbed my phone, went to the bathroom, and checked the footage. Most of it was just normal daycare chaos. Kids running around. Me walking back and forth, nothing weird. Then, at the 43-minute mark, something changed. The kids were playing near the front of the house. The hallway leading to the stairs was empty. And then she walked in. A girl, white dress, barefoot. She stepped into the frame, but there was something wrong with the way she moved. Too smooth, too slow. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned her head. I dropped my phone because she was looking directly at the camera, like she knew. I quit that day. Didn't give a reason. Didn't even go back for my last paycheck. I don't know who she was. I don't know why the kids saw her before I did. But I know one thing for sure. She wasn't supposed to be there. Last year, I was desperate for a job. I had just moved to a new city, barely scraping by, when I found an ad for a night shift security guard. The pay was too good, but I didn't question it. I needed the money. The place was an abandoned office building downtown. Not fully abandoned, apparently, a company still owned it, but it had been empty for years. They wanted someone to watch over it, make sure no squatters or vandals got in. Easy enough. Or so I thought. The rules. When I got there, my supervisor, a guy named Rick, walked me through everything. Told me which doors to check, which cameras to watch. Then he handed me a list of rules. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke, but Rick just looked at me, dead serious. He said, "Follow these exactly. If you break a rule, you won't make it till morning." I remember the rules word for word. Lock the doors behind you when you enter. No matter what. Never look at camera 3. If it turns on, ignore it. If you hear knocking on the windows, do not check. There's nothing there. At exactly 3:12 a.m., you will hear footsteps upstairs. Do not investigate. If you hear your own voice over the radio, do not respond. If the elevator dings, even though no one is in the building, hide. I asked if he was messing with me. Rick didn't smile. He just said, "Don't break the rules." Then he left. The first few hours. At first, everything was fine. The place was dead silent, just the hum of the security monitors. I did my rounds, checked the locks, watched the cameras. Then, at 1:27 a.m., camera 3 turned on. I froze. The screen was just black, like the camera was facing a wall. A part of me wanted to check, but I remembered the rules, so I didn't. I turned away from the screen, heart pounding, and tried to focus on the other cameras. At 2:46 a.m., the knocking started. Soft at first, then louder. It came from the windows on the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor was completely empty. No one was supposed to be there. I clenched my fists and stared straight ahead. I didn't check. Eventually, it stopped. 3:12 a.m. I kept watching the clock. My heart was racing. Then, at 3:12 a.m., I heard them. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Directly above me. I knew the rules. I knew not to investigate. But something was wrong. The footsteps weren't just random. They were pacing. Back and forth. Like something knew I was there. Like it was waiting. I held my breath, gripping the edge of the desk. The footsteps stopped. Then, the elevator dinged. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. I ducked into the storage room, shutting the door as quietly as I could. I could hear it, something stepping out of the elevator. Slow, heavy, like it had weight. I peeked through the crack in the door. There was something standing in the hallway. Tall, thin, its arms too long, its head tilted like it was listening. Its skin looked wrong, stretched too tight over its bones. And then, it turned its head toward me. I stopped breathing. I swear it smiled. Then, in a voice that sounded just like mine, it whispered, "I see you." I ran. I don't even remember getting to my car. I just know that by the time I looked back at the building, the thing was standing at the window, smiling. The aftermath, I quit that night, never went back. Rick never answered my calls. But the worst part? A week later, I checked the job listing again. It was still up, same description, same pay, same rules. I still wonder who took the job after me, and did they make it till morning?